Hi, everybody. Welcome to Rewind and Reflect, where we believe in the universal law that there's no such thing as coincidences or mistakes. And we are here to share our stories with you. My name's Deb Miller.
Hi, Deb. I am Susan Doyle. Hi, everybody. Good to be back.
Yeah, it is good to be back. I was just thinking about our song, that jazzy little
It is
intro.
a jazzy little number, isn't it?
You just can't help but move when you hear it, even though we have no idea what it is or, has no special meaning, but it does work. So
So two things. I thought about you this morning
oh boy.
as I was taking a few minutes when I was drinking my coffee, and I was scrolling through social media, which I hate to do first thing in the morning, but I didn't exercise this morning, so I just kind of wanted to zone out. And there's this thing that popped up that the Breakfast Club is 40 years old today. And then it said underneath, so those of you who are reading this are the same age as Vernon, the principal,
Oh,
was on that movie, in that movie. And I was like, oh,
wow.
God,
Oh,
ouch.
that hurts.
That
That
really,
40 years. Oh,
that is like a nice punch in the gut.
but it, I don't feel like I feel like
I
I'm
don't
still
either.
in high school sometimes. Like I
I
just
do too, because I was like, I'm scrolling through, I'm like, oh my God, Breakfast Club. And then a couple of weeks ago, I saw the same thing. Do you remember Jake from 16 Candles? It
first.
said something like today, Jake would be like 65. And I'm like, oh,
I often wonder what
ouch.
happened to Jake. I never saw him in any other movies or anything.
Me neither. I'm wondering if he still has that cute little red Porsche. That was my favorite movie of all time. Like
Too. I love
I remember watching it with my daughter and realizing that she might have been a little too young to see the full frontal of Caroline in the shower,
uh,
but whatever. Um, and I was reciting every single line,
oh, I love it.
every line. Yeah.
The one of my favorites is the Asian kid Long Dong
Oh my
Wong.
God, Long Duck Dong.
Long Dong Dong is hungry. He
The
needs
donger. Yeah.
the
Oh yeah.
Oh
Oh my
yeah, that was
goodness.
such a great movie. For those of you who haven't watched it, you should see it. Pretty in Pink. No
Movie
matter
is
what age
such a
you are.
classic.
I know. Those
Such a
were
classic. And so the other thing I was always of course always thinking about you. And so this weekend I have to give a shout out to my husband.
Mm.
We're not going to get into relationship stuff, but I do have to give him a shout out because he had a shoulder replacement a few years ago and a knee replacement a year ago. And he and I'm constantly very lovingly badgering him that he needs to do yoga. I think it would just be so good for him. He does not sleep great, or he doesn't sleep for a long period of time. I should say the quality of sleep he gets is great. The quantity of sleep, not so much. And I'm always like, I think you'd love it. And he loves sweating and, all that jazz. And he keeps saying, before it was like, okay, let me heal for my shoulder. And then it was, okay, I need to get my knee down. And now let me heal for my knee. So the studio that I practice at, this past weekend I call it a workshop. It was like a class that explained the foundations of like the physical foundation, but also like the actual pillars of how this type of yoga was created, things like and what they speak about in class, and kind of dispelled the myth kind of thing. And so just, a few weeks ago it was being advertised. I'm like, hey, like it's almost a year. You told me it was going to be a year that you decided to come to class um, after your name. Do you want to take this foundations class? I said, I think it would be really great. It kind of give you an understanding of, just some of the poses and what to expect. And And he said, yes. So literally, I mean, I flew that money and into that sign up before he could even take a breath after him saying yes. So it was this past weekend, this past Saturday. Okay, it was 2.5 hours long. So first of all, God love him for sitting in that room on the floor for two
Yeah.
and a half hours. He
Wow.
doesn't sit anywhere for 2.5 hours. Um, and even during the class, like we had to pick partners, and then after the first, we had to pick other partners. So he had to do things with a
Oh, wow.
complete stranger. And I was like, oh my God, this is actually happening. And so the facilitator, who happens to be the instructor that I take every Saturday, and I think he is beyond a gift, beyond a gift to this world. Um, Said, if you take one thing away from here, then it was worth your time. And so he started the class by saying, what did you have to give up to get here? And so a lot of people said they had to get a babysitter for their children, or they had to forego something like that. So long story short, we're going through all the pillars, and Sean is listening. He stood up and he participated, like he answered a question. I was so proud
Oh,
of him.
time out.
And
Time out. I have a
mhm.
question. Has he ever done yoga before?
Yes, sort of.
Okay.
Like he'll go through phases like, please teach me how to do this. And so we'll go down. I have a studio in my basement that gets hot, and there's enough for like 2 mats, and he built it for me with a radiant heat panel. It gets to be like 100 in there. It's great. So he's gone down there. Um, but you know how it is trying to learn something from your significant other.
But he's never done a practice, gone into a yoga studio and done the practice of yoga. He's been taught.
No, in a class like
This
that,
is,
no.
yeah, so this is brand spanking new, and that's amazing because you're so invested in your yoga
Yeah.
practice, and he doesn't
Mm-hmm.
know anything about it. So now,
Mm-hmm.
and he
Mm-hmm.
gets it. So that's amazing. Okay, so continue on.
So the instructor was like, listen, so the Byron Baptiste was the guy who created this type of yoga. And he said, he took it, and this was the perfect opportunity for Sean to understand why I am attracted to it. So he said, Byron has taken the art and practice of yoga off the mountaintop and brought it to a space where it's understandable for
Mhm.
people. So he starts talking, and he starts saying that, um, what did you have to give up to get here? And then he starts talking about the principles and the pillars. And one of them is you need to be willing to come apart. Like you need to give up what you know in order to be open for something new.
Mhm.
And with that comes lots of times in class, he'll say, relax the muscles in your face. And he said, we have like 80 something muscles in our face. And we are constantly walking around every single day with a mask on.
Mm.
And so I kept thinking about it, and I'm like, first of all, Sean was willing to come apart from
Mhm.
everything he knows about exercise and
Mhm.
do this class for 2.5 hours. And then I kept thinking to myself, it's really interesting to me that how many times in our lives, or even during our day, are we willing to completely come apart? And meaning doing something without thinking about what you're going to look like, how you're going to sound, whether it's right or not, or, and I'm like, it was so thought provoking for me, because he says it a lot in class. And I'm like, what do you mean? What do you mean? I'm like, and he said, he gave an example, and this really, kind of spoke to me. He said, when I first started teaching, this was the instructor, I was more concerned about what I was getting out of the class and how I looked and sounded to the students. Now that I don't teach that way anymore, it was very, one, egotistical of me to think that, and very, not necessarily fraudulent, but not teaching or giving from a space like deep inside me without being, outcome based. And so I was thinking about it and I'm like, you know what? I remember when I first started teaching, and then I would be a student in a class, like I would just take a class as a student, and I would have put so much pressure on myself to be like, I have to be the best one in this class because I'm an instructor. And if I'm not the best one in this class, people aren't going to come to my class because people are going to think that I suck.
Mm.
And I remember taking yoga and never using a block, never using a strap, always never taking a modification because I was like, how can I do that and call myself an instructor?
Mm.
Um, and it wasn't until kind of like this teacher, it wasn't until I said, you know what? Like, I need to teach just for the sake of teaching because it spoke to me that I feel like I need to give the gift to other people. And it wasn't until I stopped worrying about how many people came to my class, worrying about making a mistake, worrying about looking bad, and just speaking from my truth, my classes exploded.
Mhm.
It was the complete opposite of what I thought was going to happen.
Mm. Well, people were attracted to your authenticness instead of, the amount, whatever else that might be. People are, we're all humans, we're all spirits, and we are all connected through our spirit. So people are going to, tend to surround like-minded people,
Yeah.
and that's
Yeah, it
what
was
happens.
almost like before that, when I was teaching, it was like I was putting on a show.
Yeah.
Like, come see the show.
Mhm.
And now it's just, here I am. I love what I'm doing. I want to share it with the world,
Yeah.
or you 15 or 30 people or 40 people sitting in front of me. Like, let's kind of be in it together,
Right.
right? And then I started thinking about other aspects of my life. It's almost like people give you labels, right? Like, you're the strong one, you're the young one, you're the old one, you're the when you're married or having kid, or you're the
Mhm.
disciplinarian, you're the good cop, you're the bad cop. Yeah. And how often we take on these personas,
Mm.
and then we don't know how to come apart
Right.
because we've lived into these labels.
Yeah. Well, expectations. People have, we have these expectations placed on us, and therefore we have to feel like we have to live up to them. And I totally understand what you're saying, and what you're getting at. And I think that there is a time in our life when we are first working towards a career that we want to be successful. There are things that you have to do. There are ways that you have to prove yourself. However, it doesn't have to be in the way that you don't need to let your ego get take charge of this. You can simply say, this is what my goal is and this is how I'm going to reach it, but take your ego out and just be your true authentic self, and you're going to be so much more successful. I mean, I wore a mask. I mean, I told you guys about the tater tot story, right? I told you about the tater tot story.
You did. How you can, yes, you can repeat it though. It was quite funny. I mean, long story short, you had a tater tot in your hair.
Okay, so yeah, so my position with my company was vice president of sales. Like it was an executive position. And when you think of vice president of sales, you think of like, you know, really put together heels, suit, just very and that was never me. I was never that person, but I had to pretend to be at certain times when I would go to different events and activities for my work. And one time I walked around this particular event, and unbeknownst to me, I had a part of a tater tot stuck in my hair. And yeah, I was hungry when I arrived, so I quickly grabbed, like, I had tater tots. I love tater tots. Who doesn't love tater tots, right? So I ate some tater tots and then I made my way around the room, which was probably my first mistake. Like, don't just show up to something and just start eating. But I
Shovel
mean,
some tater tots in and then network. I don't
yeah,
know.
like nobody's gonna notice me up at the bar eating some tater tots. But anyway, so it was the end of the event, and I was leaving and saying goodbye to people. And this one gentleman that I've known for a long time, thank God, he said, "I just, you got something stuck in your hair." And sure enough, I looked down and it was a tater tot, and I thought, "Oh my God, I just went through this entire thing with the mask on, trying to like
Right,
be this thing person that I'm not." And
right.
uh and the universe was like, yeah, we're gonna show you that you don't need to be this person. So long story short, I ended up calling my assistant on the way home and telling her the story, and we just laughed our heads off.
I think I might have wet my pants
Oh my
when you
God,
first
we
told me
were
that story.
playing. But I said, she goes, but Deb, that's the thing about you. And I did do this when I first got that job. I said to my entire team, listen, I am not going to be your normal VP of sales because, I've never had this position before. I'm still learning. I'm going to need, support from you as much as you need support from me. And we just really worked together as a team. There was no hire.
Hmm.
And, but if I didn't go through my addiction and into recovery and had to be exposed, like talk about ripping off your mask.
Well, I was thinking that, I mean, the burden and the weight of the mask and shield that you had to wear
Mm.
to hide your addiction for that many years had to have been crushing.
Oh, it was so crushing. I literally lied to everybody about who I was. Okay. And guess how they found out about who I really was? In the police blotter of the
I was
newspaper.
gonna say, yeah, I'm thinking in the little Avon newspaper or Canton newspaper, seeing your name in the
Yeah.
police blotter. Yeah.
So imagine that that's how your truth comes out, by the most humiliating, embarrassing thing, you getting arrested time after time after time for um, false prescriptions, which are felonies, and that is how, so I went from saying I'm this person to being called out as the other person. And then I mean, I didn't want to leave the house. I was so embarrassed and I was so ashamed. But when I going into recovery and you start working on these parts of you that led you to behave that way, or to lie about who you are, or whatever it may be, granted me the opportunity to really look at myself and be okay
Hmm.
with it, and be the type of person now that I'm like, listen, I am so far from perfect.
Right.
What you see is what you get. You don't like it, I'm sorry.
Right.
But I can't pretend to be somebody else, because guess what? I will be called out on it every single time. And I don't want to be called out on shit anymore. I just want to be
Yeah.
me.
Yeah, it's funny. I think one of the great facilitators of dropping that proverbial mask for you and for I think everybody is asking for help.
Mm. Oh,
I was always, still am labeled the strong one. Like anything that came my way, I could handle.
mm,
Anything I did not even skip a beat, right? And it got to the point where I'm like, well, how can I ask for help if I'm supposed to be the strong one? Like
right.
people are not, they're not going to help me, right? Or they're going to tell me that, well, you can figure it out, which I got my entire life. My entire life. I got, but you can figure it, you can handle it, you can figure it out. Um, the strength though it took for me and still does today. I'm not gonna lie, it still does today. Not as bad because I have, now I've surrounded myself with people who don't equate strength in a human being at don't equate it to somebody who doesn't never asks for help. Um, but it took a lot for me to get over that of, well, I can do it. That was my tag. Well, I can do it. Okay. Yeah, sure, I can do it. I can handle it. I got you. Or I'll figure it out. The big tagline for me was I'll figure it out.
Yeah. Even when we were younger, Sue, like you were always the stronger one in our friendship. Like you were always the one that I've always been in the passenger seat of relationships, and I've been comfortable there. You were always in the driver's seat. You always would, be the one that I would just kind of follow, because you were the strong one. But I think in the end, it became such an obligation for you that
Yes.
you weren't able to, nobody can go through life without asking for help in one way, shape, or form. But
That is the best way I have ever, including my therapist, heard somebody describe it. It was this such a heavy obligation.
yes, and,
Yeah.
and it did, oh my gosh, it just brings me back to the lessons of, that I've been learning about how we are so programmed when we are little and into our teen years of how we are supposed to be instead of how we are really. And we got to change that narrative. We
Yeah.
have got to change that narrative because it's not fair to anybody if you're
Right.
pretending to be somebody that you're not, and you have these expectations of you that, you know, you're going to be a certain type of person. And, I've said this to you before in the past, you have broken that cycle with your children. You have allowed them
Yes.
who they are 100% without any expectations of things that you were bound with.
Yeah, I mean, I remember way back, even asking my parents for help on my homework, and they would say no, figure it out.
Mm.
Or can you help me? No, you can figure it out.
They thought they were
Um,
helping. They thought they were doing the right thing
oh
by
my God, it
by
made me
making.
so hard. It just
Yeah.
hardened me.
Yes. Yes.
Um, but and this just popped into my head. Another thing that is spoken frequently in my yoga practice is come as you are, not as you think you should,
Mhm.
which is all about you're different. Your emotions are different. The way you feel is every single day is different. Your body physically feels differently every day. Mentally, you're different every day. And just show up as you are.
Yeah.
And that is truly living in front of the mask and without the shield.
Yeah. Well, we're shedding our skin in a lot of different ways at this time in our life. And it's just a shame that, we didn't know enough or think enough about ourselves that we did it early on. You know, I was the type of person that I never asked for help because it was always assumed that I needed help. And
Well, I mean,
yeah,
okay.
I did. And then so I never had to ask for help because I was always the one that needed to be taken care of. And but when the time came that I needed to help, I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. But once I did it, and once, I had this flood of support and direction, it changed everything. And I feel like I know to ask for help, some people look at it as a weakness. I think especially men in
Hmm.
the world. Um, but I know for me, and I know for you for a fact that if anybody came and said, "Can you help me with this?" you would be like so honored.
Right, exactly.
Feel so
Exactly.
honored. So
Yes,
it's like,
yes.
why are we so afraid of asking for help? Because the person that we're asking is it's a gift to them.
Correct. I agree with you. And it also goes back to, we can't do life alone.
No.
We're not wired, programmed to do life alone.
No, we're not meant to be.
Um,
About all of the years ago when everybody lived in these villages together and helped raise each other's kids. And, you know, we're not meant to do.
let me ask you something. And then I have something else I want to tell you, but when you were starting, so after your journey into sobriety, and then you decided, and I don't know if it's sort of asked of you in the AA world, or you get a certain amount of years of sobriety that it's you want to sponsor and give back, and or pay forward, or kind of bestow the teachings of it onto others because it worked so well for you, whatever the case may be. When you started doing that, when you started being a sponsor for people, did you concoct anything in your mind like, okay, I have to be like this in order, you know what I'm saying? So did you feel as though you were maybe starting to build a mask as to I guess portray a certain type of sponsor?
Yeah, like look like I at least had my shit together enough to help another human being.
Agree. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Or
So
were you really upfront and honest saying, listen, I am sober. But do I have all my shit together? Absolutely not. Will I ever? Absolutely not. Nobody has their shit together. And I'm going to tell you this right here and now. No one on this planet has their shit together.
no one. Well, so with the in recovery, you have to have a year of sobriety before you can sponsor anybody, and you have to have gone through the 12 steps yourself. So it kind of makes it easy in the sense that I had just done the 12 steps with my sponsor. And so when I sponsored women, I would say to them, this is how my sponsor took me through it, and I'm going to do the same for you. If you feel that it's not working out, we can explore a different path, which I will learn about as you do, because I don't know any other way but this way. And this worked for me. And your responsibility as as a sponsor is showing by example and by work how to remain in recovery. So I didn't have to necessarily, I didn't feel like I was a professional by any chance. I just did what was told and shown to me.
Hmm.
And then my sponsees would then do the same with their sponsees. So but I did say to them right off the bat, there were some things that I'd have some boundaries that I have to make, but a lot of times relationships issues come into play because they'll say, well, and then my boyfriend this, and or we're having a fight and I don't know what to do. And I always say to them, because my sponsor said to me, I am not here to help you with your relationship problems. I'm here to help you with your alcohol and drug problems. So you're going to have to
Okay.
find another outlet for that because I'm not a professional when it comes to relationships. And
So I guess, let me stop you there for a second. So did any of them come to you and say, I just had a big blowout with my significant other, whatever, and follow it with, I am on the edge of taking a drink?
um,
And so do you sort of speak to them about the mechanisms to release that need, or that need for a drink, without addressing
the
the
relationship. Well,
yeah.
like for instance, if they were, yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say to them, well, I don't want to hear about that. I won't say that. What I'll say is, let's talk about it. And then we'll do a fourth step, which is basically like taking your responsibility for something that has gone crazy or sideways,
Hmm.
because we all have a part in a fight that's been had, or a blowout.
Hmm.
We all play a part in that. And
Hmm.
have 20 years of recovery or 5 months, we will, there's our character defects come out when we're feeling attacked, or when we're feeling
Right.
defensive or whatever. Our character defects, they come out. So I would redirect it to, okay, let me hear about it. I'm not going to tell her, oh, you got to leave him, or this, unless she, of course, unless she was in a physical or any kind of dangerous situation. That would be a whole different thing. But I'm not, I need to focus on her and how she can walk away from our meeting feeling stronger, better, and away from a drink. And that will come with answers and with insight to what has happened and how it can be fixed. Um, yeah, so there's every single step in AA, the 12 steps, AA, NA, OA,
Hmm.
whatever it is, there's always the answer to a problem in those steps. Always.
Agreed.
Always. You just have to, take a deep breath and go, okay, get it all out and let's sort through it and figure out what the best plan of action is. And you'll find them in the step work.
And so do you, after all these years, still have a sponsor?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I had a sponsor from the first week I was in AA for 8 years, and then she went out, and that destroyed me because we became very close, very good friends. She was a single mom, I was a single mom. Like we were really, really close. And she went out and she started drinking again. And then I went without a sponsor for quite some time, which is never good.
Hmm.
So the first chance I got that I to find one, I did, and she's been my sponsor for 4 years now.
And so do you just, I mean, for it sounds like such a elementary question, but I forgive my
Yeah,
naivete. Do you just find somebody at a meeting and say, hey, will you be my sponsor,
yeah.
knowing that they have more years of sobriety than you do?
Yes. So, but some people in recovery that don't have as much time with them, but they can tell that they're evolved spiritually more than
Hmm.
before. So yeah, you can do that. You don't have to have more years or whatever.
Okay.
We say, you're attracted to a person when you look at them and say, I want what they have, whatever it is, their attitude, their
Okay.
demeanor, their light.
Uh-huh.
I
Okay.
want that. And that's when you know that that sponsor is going to elevate you to where you want to be.
Hmm.
So
Interesting.
now
So,
girls, like when I'm in at the Salvation Army Rehab Center, in order
hmm.
for those girls to commence after 4 months of and being in there, they have to have a sponsor. So they don't get a choice. Like they don't get to go to a meeting and be like, "Oh, I like you." They have to do
Hmm.
their step work before. But when they get out and start going to their own meetings, they can, then get another sponsor if they want. But you got to
Interesting.
be blind. Yeah.
Okay. And so for you, Um, do you find that the more vulnerable and honest you are with your character flaws, your story, the easier it is for you to sponsor somebody. The
Yeah.
easier it is, I hate to use the word counsel, more like, is it easier for you to help somebody?
Yeah. I mean, listen, I usually start out not necessarily with my sponsees, but people in my life, like I will tell my sponsees about people in general. Keep your
Mm-hmm.
expectations low and your gratitude high because people
Mm-hmm.
are going to let you down. We're just not perfect human beings. You're gonna be let down by people, but you
Right.
always something to be grateful about. So when I start with my sponsees, they pretty much know all about me anyways because they've heard my story or they've read my book or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Because my book is in rehab facilities, the ones that I help, and they read the book, so it helps them to kind of get an idea of who I am. But I absolutely am like, I am not a perfect person, so do not look to me. I'm just like you, but I just
Mm-hmm.
have more tools in my arsenal that I'm going to show
Yeah.
you right now. So,
That's so funny because you know, I read this or heard it the other day is we're all students.
yeah,
Teachers are just students farther along on the
yeah,
path.
that's so true.
And I'm thinking to myself, that is freaking brilliant.
Yeah. And it's so true. And you are further along in so many different ways than I am. So you're teaching me. And I
Correct.
will teach you, anything that you need to know or
Yeah.
out that is filling your spirit and your soul. Um, but again, yeah, that's why we gravitate to these people because they're further along than we are.
Right.
And we
Right.
want to be there, you know. We want,
Yeah.
but
I agree.
I want to get back to you and I know even to this day it is really hard for you to ask for help. You are,
Really?
yes,
Yes.
I know
Yeah.
that. Um,
Yeah.
it is so hard and you just take on all the tasks. You just do it. Even for this podcast. You're like, oh no, I'll figure it out. The YouTube thing. We have no idea what we're doing. But you're like
Yeah.
in the scenes.
I
You've got,
think the difference now and then is I'm okay with if I don't do it right, or I'm okay with it if I fail and I have to try it again. So, yes, I agree with you. I'm not one to say no, I can't do that. Um, I am kinder to myself with the failures or the unknowing or while I'm searching. I'm not afraid to come back to you and say, I can't figure this fucking shit out. I don't know. You know what I mean? I tried this and I tried that. Um, but that kind of something popped into my head when you were speaking is I think the hardest person to be with without my mask was me.
oh yeah, yeah,
I lived into these labels and I had so many unrealistic expectations of myself that it all got so blurry
yes,
for me.
right.
And
And it's funny because I feel like back in high school when, you and I did disconnect at the end, that probably played a lot into your just being like, no more, I can't do it. Like you were carrying a lot.
a
You
lot.
need me,
Hmm.
and so you were just like, it was an avalanche and it just came down on you and you're like, I need to be independent of all of this and start anew, you know?
Yeah, and I thank you for recognizing that and realizing that and for your just raw forgiveness. Um, and, I guess at some point I just had to forgive myself that I allowed, I didn't know any better.
No,
At
you
this
did.
point now, I know better.
Yes, but I also did not realize, and you and I were tethered at the hip for years. I had no clue that your parents were that tough. Not, I don't know if tough is the
They
right
were
word.
hard. Yeah, they were hard. I mean, this is the way it's, and I'm not saying that I had it, it was certainly not a bad experience. It
You But
was
it's a lot
just,
to carry on your
it
shoulders.
was a lot to carry. It was a lot to carry, feeling as though um, there wasn't an emotional safety net.
Yes,
Like, I
that's
know that there was a financial safety net, which sounds horrible, but I know that there was always a like if I ever got in trouble, like, you know what I mean? Yes. But I never really felt that there was an emotional
right.
safety net. I mean, even up until even now, but 5, 6, 7 years ago, I remember having a conversation. My mom was in my house and we were talking about, I was reading that Elton John book, which is phenomenal. And she said, "Oh, I read it or I saw the movie and I didn't realize, he was in such turmoil or whatever." And I said, "I love it. I kind of resonate with it." And we got on the subject of my very disordered eating and exercise. And I said to my mom in a very vulnerable moment, I said, "Why didn't you ever help me?
Hmm.
Like, there's no way that you didn't notice
Yeah,
that my behavior was a little fucked up."
yeah.
And she said, "I just figured that you would take care of it. And you have, right?"
Oh my God.
And at that point, what are you going to do? You just have to say, "Yeah, yep, I'm all good."
Oh my God, Sue. Like you just did it all on your own.
Mm,
And there even I'm certain that our listeners can resonate with you because there's got to be lots of other people that were just expected. You just got to figure it out, take care of yourself, and not have somebody with any emotional intelligence, in your family.
yeah, yeah. I mean, so yeah. I mean, and I even, it's just one of those things that it's over the years. I just sort of nuanced, instead of asking for help, I would say, "Can you do me a favor?"
Mm,
Or "Do you have a moment? Like, can I just borrow you for a moment?" And it was never like, "Please just help me. Please just help me figure this out." You know?
Well, it's one thing to ask for help with a task, but it's another thing to say, I am in some trouble here inside.
Right.
I need, I need help. I
Yeah.
I need
Hmm.
to know what's going on inside of me and
Right.
give
Yeah.
me direction on how to help myself because I can't do it. You never did that. You were never,
No.
because you were trained, so to speak, to fix it yourself. And
Correct.
that is, and it's just the polar opposite with me. I was never, I never had to, my decisions were just made for me. And I just was like, okay, I mean, I never, and so
Right.
it's incredible like that, but that didn't do me any favors. I mean, that's, got that whole thing of me not having to be, there were no expectations on me because the it was like, well, she's not going to be able to do it, so we'll do it for her. Because whatever, like there's just nobody had any faith in me, like whatever. So anyways,
Yeah. I mean,
the
it's a
polar opposite.
pattern that, and I want our listeners to know, and I know that you know this. I'm not blaming anybody for any of this.
Oh, of
You
course.
know, it's just one of those things that this is, you know, this is where it took me. This and I feel like I am um in a place in my life and in a headspace where I can see how that all transpired. I can see how I got to where I was. Yeah. And I can see, you know, how I lived into it for so long. And now I am able to, you know, I kind of bringing it full circle. I'm able to realize when I'm starting to build that mask back up, to drop it. I can see at times where I'm starting to put the puzzle pieces of my suit of armor back together and walk into it. And, you know, and very much like the 12 steps or going to a meeting is when I step into my yoga class and on my yoga mat and hear what the instructor has to say, it is a reminder of the things that I need to hold true to
Mhm.
keep me healthy and open and wholehearted and vulnerable and all those things to allow the people in my life to see the real me and
Yeah.
not worry about whether they like it or not.
Mhm. Exactly.
You
That's
know what I
big.
mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
You start
I
doing
do.
that, people gravitate to you that are, that are the
And
ones.
that's the thing. I think, you know, what I present in the world today is so much more genuine than it ever has been. That things are appear to just be easier, like teaching my classes, like finding joy, like finding gratitude, having gratitude. All those things come so much easier. They're not forced because the suit of armor is, you know, in pieces on the side. And, you know, I've chosen not to put the mask on in the morning.
Right. I love it. Well, I hope our
You know,
listeners.
so I think it's time for us to wrap up, but I do want to tell you that somebody in my who takes some of my classes listens to our podcast and re-listens to it, and she sent me a picture of her notebook where she's writing notes. And she said to me the other day when I walked into class, she said, you two have something that nobody has. She said, I can't believe that you lost each other for 30 years and here you
Wow.
guys are. And I said, you know, I said, thank you. I said, the universe is truly speaking
Yeah.
because we did. I mean, we lost each other for a long time. And the minute I spoke to you that day in Walmart, it was like it just all came flooding back. So I'm
But again,
happy that people are picking up on that energy. It makes me feel good.
I know that's wonderful. And we've been getting some really positive feedback on social media, so that's great. I hope we get more, and I hope people, um, let us know what topic they'd like to hear, because that's always fun too.
Yeah, and coming up, we're gonna have maybe a guest on soon, hopefully. And yeah, keep them coming. Keep the comments coming. If you have a story to tell yourselves, please, you know, direct message us on social media, or you can email us at rewind and reflect, A-N-D is spelled out, with us at gmail.com. And I think it's time to say goodbye.
All right,
Or
everybody, namaste.
namaste. Love you, girl. Talk to you next week. Bye, everybody.